Every single morning, before the sun even touched the horizon, a black diner waiter named Darius Coleman shuffled into work, exhausted but determined. He was doing everything in his power to provide for his 7-year-old daughter, Amara, working grueling hours, surviving on tips that barely covered rent, and smiling through pain that would break most people. Every morning, at exactly the same time, an elderly woman with clouded gray eyes and trembling hands shuffled into the diner. She was quiet, distant. The other staff avoided her, annoyed by her slow pace and exact change payments. But Darius always treated her differently. He greeted her with genuine warmth. He noticed how her arthritic fingers struggled with the silverware. And one day, without being asked, he began cutting her toast into small squares so she could eat with dignity. Over time, something unexpected happened. The silent woman began to open up. She asked about his daughter. She listened to his dreams. They became something like family, two lonely souls finding comfort in each other's company. But one morning, she didn't show up. Instead, 4 men in expensive black suits walked through the door. They asked for Darius by name, and what they told him next left him absolutely speechless. Asterisk, asterisk. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Asterisk. Asterisk. The brass bell above the entrance of Magnolia Cafe gave a weary rattle each time someone pushed through the door. That sound had become Darius Coleman's morning anthem, not cheerful, just tired metal announcing another shift, another day of hoping the tip jar might be a little kinder than the one before. The diner itself was a relic frozen in time. Cracked burgundy booths with stuffing poking through the seams lined the walls. Sticky linoleum floors that hadn't been properly cleaned in decades reflected the harsh, fluorescent lights overhead. The lingering scent of burnt coffee and bacon grease seemed permanently welded into every surface. The walls, the ceiling, even the worn menus that had seen better days. Tucked away in a working-class neighborhood of Columbus, Ohio, the Magnolia had served the same crowd of factory workers, nurses, and early morning laborers for more than 40 years. For Darius, now 34 years old, this place was both a refuge and a cage. 6 days a week, from long before dawn until early afternoon, he performed what he privately called the choreography of survival, balancing plates on tired arms, pouring endless cups of coffee with practiced efficiency, forcing smiles until they felt completely disconnected from any real emotion underneath. It hadn't always been this way for him. Once, he'd been a promising culinary student at a respected cooking school in Cleveland, with a genuine gift for creating flavors that told stories. His instructors had praised his creativity, his palate, his natural understanding of how ingredients could come together to create something greater than their parts. He'd dreamed of opening his own restaurant someday, a place where the soul food of his childhood would meet modern technique, where every dish would carry the warmth his grandmother used to put into Sunday dinners back home. But dreams have a way of drowning beneath the weight of reality. His wife, Denise, left when Amara was only 3 years old. One morning, Darius woke up to find a note on the kitchen counter, written in her careful handwriting. "You're a wonderful father. Amara will be better off with you. I'm sorry I can't be what you both need. Please, don't try to find me." No explanation, no warning signs he'd noticed. Just abandonment, swift and complete. Overnight, Darius became both parents. He left the fine dining kitchens that had once excited him, the heat and creativity and camaraderie of professional cooking, for the predictable morning shifts at the Magnolia. Those shifts allowed him to pick Amara up from school every afternoon, to be there when she needed help with homework, to tuck her in at night. Stability required sacrificing every ambition he'd ever held for himself. Years passed like water through a sieve, each day blending into the next. He rose at 4:30 each morning while the world outside remained dark and silent, moving quietly through their cramped 2-bedroom apartment to prepare Amara's breakfast and leave a handwritten note for her on the kitchen table. Daddy loves you more than all the stars. Have a beautiful day, my princess. Remember to take your vitamins. Mrs. Patterson, the kind widow from apartment 3A, helped Amara get ready for school each morning, while Darius rode the early bus through the darkness. His hands had grown rough over the years from hot plates and cheap industrial soap, calloused from endless hours of manual labor that paid barely enough to survive. At home, Amara's laughter was the one force strong enough to lift him from exhaustion. 7 years old now, with curly black hair always tied into 2 perfect puffs, and bright brown eyes full of wonder and mischief, she was his entire world, wrapped in one small, beautiful person. When she ran to him each evening shouting, "Daddy," and threw her arms around his neck, every aching muscle felt worth it. Every sacrifice made sense in those moments. But the mathematics of poverty showed no mercy, no matter how hard he worked or how much he hoped. Rent for their modest 2-bedroom apartment demanded nearly $1,800 each month, and the landlord had been raising it steadily every year. After-school childcare cost another $650 because he couldn't pick her up until his shift ended. Amara's asthma medication added $120 monthly, and she needed it to breathe freely, so there was no cutting corners there. Groceries absorbed roughly $350, if he was careful, buying generic brands and planning meals meticulously. Utilities ran another $180 in the colder months. Bus fare for both of them came close to $100. Altogether, their monthly expenses hovered around $3,200, while Darius earned between $2,400 and $2,700, depending entirely on the generosity of strangers and whether the diner had good traffic that month. Even in the best months, he fell more than $400 short. Credit card debt accumulated relentlessly, nearly $15,000, now across 2 cards, with punishing interest rates, much of it from his mother's final medical bills, before she passed, and years of compounding monthly deficits, just trying to keep afloat. 3 late rent notices already hung over their heads like storm clouds. One unexpected expense, a broken bone, a car accident, a major appliance failure could shatter the fragile stability he'd worked so desperately hard to maintain. Still, Darius hid the fear from his daughter with practiced skill. He protected her innocence fiercely, making sure she never saw the collection notices or heard his conversations with creditors. Even as the weight of scarcity pressed down on his chest like a stone that grew heavier each month, he made sure Amara's world remained bright and full of possibility. At the Magnolia Cafe, Harold Barnes, the 60-something manager with a perpetually greased apron and suspicious eyes that missed nothing, would glare at Darius the moment he walked through the back door. "You're 3 minutes late, Coleman." "Sorry, Harold. Bus got stuck in traffic on High Street again." Rhonda Mitchell, who had worked the counter for nearly 30 years and considered herself the unofficial authority on everything that happened in the diner, would shake her head disapprovingly and mutter something about reliability under her breath. Darius never responded to her comments anymore. He'd learned long ago that engaging only made things worse. He simply tied his apron with practiced efficiency, started a fresh pot of coffee, and slipped into the familiar rhythm of survival that carried him through each shift. The regulars were a consistent cast in an unchanging play that repeated itself morning after morning. There was Carl, the construction foreman with thick, calloused hands, who tipped exactly $1, regardless of how much his bill came to. 2 young administrative assistants from a nearby insurance office, who came in every Tuesday and Thursday to gossip about their supervisor's messy divorce, and never seemed to notice anyone else around them. An older gentleman named Vernon, who ordered the exact same thing every single day: scrambled eggs, white toast, black coffee, and hadn't said more than 10 words to anyone in years. And then there was Eleanor. Eleanor Whitmore wasn't simply a regular customer. Over time, she had become part of the diner's very landscape, as permanent and unremarkable as the faded neon sign flickering in the window outside. Every morning at precisely 20 minutes past 7, never earlier, never later, she pushed open the heavy glass door and shuffled toward the same corner booth by the window with the view of the street. She walked with a wooden cane that had clearly seen decades of use, her steps slow but maintaining a certain dignity, despite her obvious physical struggles. She always wore the same faded gray cardigan that had been washed so many times the color had become indeterminate, a plain white blouse underneath, worn beige slacks, and well-traveled shoes that looked like they had seen decades of walking down countless roads. Her face was lined with deep wrinkles that mapped a lifetime of experiences, some joyful, many clearly painful. Her pale gray eyes were clouded by early cataracts that made it difficult for her to see clearly, giving her a perpetually distant expression. She moved through the busy diner like a quiet ghost that nobody particularly wanted to acknowledge. Customers would glance at her briefly and look away. Staff members would serve her with minimal conversation. She existed in a bubble of isolation, even in a room full of people. The first morning she appeared, nearly 2 years earlier, Harold had pulled Darius aside, with specific instructions delivered in his gruff, no-nonsense tone. Don't waste time on the old woman. Black coffee, breakfast special. Exact change every time. No conversation needed. She doesn't tip anyway, so don't bother trying to be friendly. Rhonda had scoffed from behind the register, adding her own assessment. Complete waste of a 4-person booth for someone who orders the cheapest thing on the menu and sits there for an hour. We could turn that table 3 times if she'd eat somewhere else. But Darius saw something else entirely when he looked at Eleanor Whitmore. He saw loneliness, the kind of dignified, quiet solitude that stirred something deep inside him, something he recognized intimately from his own experience. The artist who still lived somewhere beneath his exhaustion and financial desperation recognized a kindred spirit, someone moving through the world largely unseen, waiting patiently for anyone to notice they existed at all. He ignored their advice completely. On that first morning, he walked to her corner booth and set a menu gently before her with both hands. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm Darius. Can I start you off with some coffee today?" She grunted without looking up, her eyes fixed on something outside the window that only she could see. He poured the coffee anyway, setting the cup precisely where she could reach it easily, without straining her arthritic hands. The next morning, he greeted her again, with the same warmth, and the morning after that. For weeks that stretched into months, she met every kindness with silence. But Darius persisted without any expectation of reciprocation, simply offering small courtesies the way his grandmother had taught him back when he was a boy in her kitchen. You treat people right because that's who you are, child, not because of what they might give you back. Kindness is its own reward. Sometimes he'd mention the weather as he refilled her coffee. Sometimes he'd tell her the biscuits looked particularly good that day, and she might want to try one. His voice remained warm and genuine, even when she gave him nothing in return. Not a word, not a smile, not even eye contact. Then came a Monday morning, nearly 3 months after she'd started coming. That changed everything between them forever. Darius brought her the breakfast special as usual, and noticed her struggling desperately with the toast. Her knuckles were swollen and visibly gnarled with arthritis, her fingers trembling so badly she couldn't grip the dull knife well enough to cut through the bread. She tried once, twice, 3 times, each attempt more frustrating than the last, before setting the knife down with a small sound of defeat. Without hesitation, without asking permission or making a production of it, Darius gently took the knife from beside her hand. "Let me help you with that, ma'am," he said quietly, his voice carrying no pity, only simple, human kindness. He cut the toast into 4 neat squares, small enough for her to pick up easily with her shaking fingers, perfectly sized for someone whose hands no longer cooperated the way they once had. For the very first time in all those months, Eleanor Whitmore looked up at him directly. Her clouded gray eyes met his warm brown ones, and something powerful flickered across her weathered face. Surprise at being noticed. Gratitude for such a simple gesture. Perhaps the profound ache of being truly seen after years of living in invisibility. She gave him the faintest nod, barely perceptible to anyone else watching, but to Darius, that small gesture felt absolutely monumental. From that morning forward, a quiet ritual formed between them that neither of them ever discussed, but both understood completely. Each day, he brought her black coffee prepared just the way she liked it, the breakfast special of the day, and toast carefully cut into 4 perfect squares. Sometimes he shared tiny pieces of his life during those brief exchanges. A humorous customer moment that had made him laugh, a story about Amara's latest drawing that was currently displayed on their refrigerator, or the dream he still secretly harbored of opening his own restaurant someday where food could bring people together. Eleanor said nothing for months in response, but she listened. Truly listened in a way that most people never did. Her attention was complete and focused, and Darius could tell that she heard and remembered everything he shared with her. And sometimes, she left an extra quarter beside her exact payment, a small gesture that meant more to Darius than any generous tip from a wealthy customer ever could, because he understood it represented something beyond money. It was connection. It was acknowledgement. It was gratitude expressed in the only way she seemed able to express it. His coworkers teased him relentlessly about his dedication to this one difficult customer. "Still courting your corner girlfriend?" Rhonda laughed one morning, her tone more mocking than playful. Harold simply shrugged his heavy shoulders. "As long as she doesn't complain about anything, do whatever you want with your time." Darius didn't care what any of them thought. Those 10 quiet minutes each morning had become an anchor in his chaotic, financially drowning life. Something genuine and unperformed, in a world where he spent most of his hours pretending everything was fine, when it clearly wasn't. He wasn't kind to Eleanor for recognition or reward. He was kind because he truly saw her, because he knew intimately and painfully what it felt like to move through the world unseen and unacknowledged. What Darius didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have imagined in his wildest dreams, was that his simple acts of daily compassion were being carefully observed and meticulously documented by a far sharper mind than anyone in that humble diner could have ever suspected. Asterisk. Asterisk. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. Asterisk. Asterisk. Nearly 17 months had passed since their quiet ritual began, time flowing beneath a bridge of silent mornings and small kindnesses that accumulated like drops of water, eventually filling an ocean. Then one Thursday morning, as Darius refilled Eleanor's coffee cup with his usual careful attention, her hoarse voice emerged for the very first time since he'd known her. "You have a child." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, an observation she had somehow gathered from the fragments of life he'd shared during their one-sided conversations. Darius froze mid-pour, the coffee pot suspended in the air between them. In all these months of serving her, she had never initiated a conversation beyond accepting her meal with a subtle nod of acknowledgement. This was something entirely new. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, his face immediately brightening with the genuine warmth that always appeared whenever he thought about his daughter. "A daughter. She's 7 years old now. Her name's Amara." Eleanor nodded slowly, studying him with those pale gray eyes that suddenly seemed significantly more focused and alert despite the cataracts clouding them. There was intelligence there, sharp, penetrating intelligence that he hadn't noticed before. "Why do you work such early hours? Who looks after her in the mornings when you're here?" Darius told her about waking before dawn every single day, about preparing Amara's breakfast the night before so everything would be ready, about leaving encouraging handwritten notes that she could read when she woke up alone, about Mrs. Patterson from down the hall, who volunteered to help get Amara ready for school each morning out of pure neighborly kindness. Eleanor listened without interruption, her weathered face unreadable but clearly attentive to every word he spoke. "That sounds very difficult," she finally said, her voice carrying a weight and gravity that Darius couldn't quite identify, but could definitely feel. Being both mother and father to a child. Carrying that responsibility alone. He shrugged, a small smile playing at the corners of his tired mouth. "It's what needs doing, ma'am. I'm her father. She depends on me completely. There's no one else." Eleanor studied him for a long, penetrating moment that seemed to stretch beyond normal time. When she finally spoke again, her voice trembled ever so slightly with some emotion he couldn't name. "You're a good father, Darius Coleman. Better than most, who have far more resources than you do. Those simple words struck him with completely unexpected force, like a physical blow to his chest. His throat tightened painfully, and he had to look away quickly before the emotion showed too clearly on his face. Because nobody had ever said that to him before, not Denise before she abandoned them, not Harold who only criticized, not well-meaning neighbors or distant relatives who occasionally checked in. Nobody. But this elderly stranger, someone he barely knew beyond their morning ritual of coffee and toast, had truly seen him. She had witnessed and acknowledged the invisible labor of single parenthood that usually went completely unnoticed by the rest of the world. From that morning forward, Eleanor began asking about Amara whenever Darius came to refill her coffee. What grade was she in at school? What subjects did she enjoy most? Did Darius read to her at night before bed? What were her dreams for the future? Darius answered gladly, his entire demeanor visibly transforming whenever he mentioned his daughter, his exhaustion lifting, his eyes brightening, his voice filling with unmistakable love and pride. Amara loves drawing animals more than anything, especially horses. She's absolutely convinced she'll have one someday. I keep every single picture she makes, taped to our apartment walls. The whole place looks like an art gallery at this point. She wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up so she can help animals that are sick or hurt. I tell her she can be absolutely anything she sets her mind to, and I believe it completely. Eleanor listened to every word with complete attention, and sometimes very rarely, a faint smile would tug at the weathered corners of her thin lips. It was a smile that transformed her entire face when it appeared, revealing glimpses of the vibrant woman she must have been decades earlier, before whatever sorrows had brought her to this lonely corner booth. Their conversations remained brief, never more than 5 or 10 minutes before she would signal she wanted to be left alone again. But those exchanges became the highlight of Darius's entire morning shift. He found himself looking forward to 7:20 with an anticipation he hadn't felt about anything in years. Then came a Saturday morning in late September that would alter everything. Darius received a phone call from Mrs. Patterson at 6:45 a.m., panic evident in her normally calm voice. Darius, I'm so terribly sorry to do this to you. I can't watch Amara today. My daughter was in a car accident last night in Cincinnati. She's going to be okay, thank God. But I need to get to the hospital immediately. I'm already packing. Darius's heart plummeted into his stomach. He had to work. Harold had already written him up twice for schedule issues, and another incident might cost him his job entirely. Amara's usual Saturday art class didn't start until 10 a.m., and the instructor couldn't take her early. He had no family in Columbus, no other friends he could call on such short notice. With no other option available, he made the difficult decision to bring Amara to the diner with him. Daddy has to work today, sweetheart, he explained as they rode the early bus together through the quiet Saturday morning streets. You'll sit quietly and do your homework, okay? And you can bring your coloring books and crayons. I'll check on you as much as I can. Amara, wearing her favorite purple backpack decorated with butterfly stickers and containing everything she might need, nodded eagerly with the simple trust children have in their parents. Yes, Daddy. I'll be really good, I promise. Super quiet like a mouse. The moment they walked through the diner door together, Harold looked up from behind the register, his expression darkening immediately, with obvious displeasure. Coleman, why is your kid here? This isn't a daycare. I'm truly sorry, Harold. My sitter had a family emergency. Her daughter was in an accident. I had absolutely no other choice on such short notice. Amara will sit quietly in the back corner and won't disturb anyone. I promise she won't cause any trouble. Harold sighed heavily, making a show of his irritation. Fine, but don't let her lose us any customers with noise or running around. Keep her out of the way. Darius led Amara to a small table near the kitchen, where she could remain within his constant line of sight. Sit right here and work on your homework, baby girl. I'll check on you as often as I possibly can, okay? And you can color after you finish your math worksheet. Amara opened her workbook and box of crayons, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration as she focused on her addition problems with adorable seriousness. At exactly 7:20, the door opened with its familiar chime. Eleanor walked in as she always did, leaning on her cane. But this morning, as she passed the counter heading toward her usual booth, she stopped abruptly, her gaze fixing on Amara, the small girl sitting alone, bent intently over her homework with focused determination. Darius noticed immediately and hurried over, embarrassment coloring his voice. "I apologize, ma'am. I had to bring my daughter today. My regular sitter had a family emergency. She won't cause any trouble at all, I promise." Eleanor looked at Amara for a long, measuring moment, then back at Darius. Her pale gray eyes held an expression he'd never seen before. In all their months together, something raw and achingly human, breaking through her usual reserve. "That's your daughter? The one you've told me about?" "Yes, ma'am. Her name's Amara. She's 7 years old." Eleanor remained silent for several heartbeats, her weathered hands gripping her cane tightly until her knuckles turned white. Then she said something Darius never could have anticipated in 100 years. "Let her sit with me." Darius froze completely, certain he'd somehow misheard. "Ma'am?" Eleanor's eyes met his directly, and for the first time in their entire acquaintance, clear and powerful emotion flickered in those pale depths. Pain, longing, profound loneliness, all mixed together in a way that made Darius's chest tighten with unexpected sympathy. "I'd like to get to know her," Eleanor said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "May I have that privilege, Darius?" For the next several hours that morning, Darius watched from a distance as something absolutely miraculous unfolded in that corner booth. Eleanor, the silent, seemingly distant woman he'd known for nearly 2 years, came completely and utterly alive in the presence of this child. She reviewed Amara's homework with careful attention, gently correcting a few mistakes and praising her efforts warmly. She taught her multiplication tricks that Amara's teacher hadn't covered yet. She laughed, actually laughed out loud, a sound Darius had never heard from her when the girl grasped a particularly tricky problem. When Amara announced she was going to color a picture of her daddy because he's my superhero, Eleanor's hands trembled, visibly as she watched the child work with intense concentration. "Why is your father your superhero?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Amara didn't hesitate for even a second. "Because he works really hard to take care of me all by himself. He makes me breakfast every morning before I even wake up and leaves me notes that say he loves me. And he always picks me up from school and helps with my homework and reads me stories at night even when he's really tired. And when I'm scared of anything, he makes everything better. That's what superheroes do." Several feet away, pouring coffee for another customer, Darius heard every single word his daughter spoke. His vision blurred with tears he couldn't control, and he had to turn away quickly, pretending to check something in the kitchen before anyone could see. When Amara finished her drawing a charmingly clumsy stick figure, holding a tray of food with messy letters, spelling, "My Daddy, My Hero," above it, Eleanor held the paper with trembling hands, as if it were made of the most precious and delicate material in the world. Darius noticed something that made his own throat tighten painfully. A single tear sliding down the elderly woman's weathered cheek, leaving a glistening trail on her lined skin. "You're very fortunate," Eleanor said softly, her voice catching slightly on the words, "to have a father who loves you so completely and sacrifices so much for your happiness. Never forget that, child. Never take it for granted." By noon, Amara had fallen asleep in the booth, exhausted from the early morning and the excitement of making a new friend. Quietly, reverently, Eleanor removed her faded gray cardigan and draped it gently over the sleeping child's shoulders like a blanket, tucking it carefully around her small body. When Darius approached to check on them, emotion flooded through his chest in powerful waves he couldn't suppress. "Thank you so much, Mrs. Whitmore," he whispered, his voice thick with feeling. "You didn't have to do any of this. It was incredibly kind." Eleanor looked up at him, her eyes glassy, with unshed tears that caught the morning light streaming through the window. "No, Darius, thank you. You gave me something invaluable today, something I thought I'd lost forever. What gift, ma'am? Eleanor's voice broke slightly as she answered. The chance to be a grandmother again, even if just for a few precious hours. Then she said something that sent Darius retreating to the back storage room to compose himself. His chest heaving with emotion he could barely contain. I once had a daughter, and a granddaughter about Amara's age. They're both gone now, taken from me far too soon in an accident I couldn't prevent. But today it felt like they were still here with me somehow, like I got to hold that love one more time before I go. As Eleanor prepared to leave later that afternoon, Amara grabbed her weathered hand with both of her small ones. Mrs. Whitmore, will you come back next Saturday? You promised to teach me about fractions, and I want to show you more of my drawings. Eleanor knelt down stiffly, taking the child's small hand in both of her own. I promise, dear child. I absolutely promise I'll be here. As Eleanor walked slowly toward the door, Amara tugged at Darius's hand and whispered, Daddy, Mrs. Whitmore is really nice, but she seems sad inside, like she's carrying something heavy that she can't put down. Darius hugged his daughter tightly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Yes, baby, she does seem sad. That's why we need to be especially kind to her, okay? Sometimes, people are fighting battles we can't see. Amara nodded seriously, with wisdom beyond her years. Like she was kind to us today. Exactly like that, sweetheart. What Darius didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known, was that this would be the last time he would ever see Eleanor Whitmore alive. Asterisk, asterisk. If you were in Darius's shoes right now, facing the loss of someone who had quietly become family, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. Asterisk, asterisk. Monday arrived like every other morning in Darius's carefully constructed routine until it didn't. By 7:35, Eleanor still hadn't appeared. A strange unease bloomed in Darius's chest, growing stronger with each passing minute. She had never been late, not once in nearly 2 years of mornings together. At 9:17, the brass bell above the door chimed differently. The entire restaurant fell silent, as if someone had pressed a mute button on the world. 4 men entered the diner, tall and imposing in tailored charcoal suits, moving with the precision of trained professionals. They made way for a 5th figure, a silver-haired woman in an expensive dove-gray suit, who carried herself with unmistakable authority. She approached Darius directly. Are you Darius? Anthony Coleman? Yes, ma'am, that's me. My name is Victoria Thornton, senior partner at Morrison, Thornton and Associates. I was Mrs. Eleanor Constance Whitmore's personal attorney for 32 years. Darius's heart seemed to stop. Mrs. Whitmore, is she all right? She didn't come in this morning, and I've been worried. A faint crack appeared in Miss Thornton's professional composure. Mrs. Whitmore passed away peacefully in her sleep Sunday evening. I'm very sorry to bring you this news. The world tilted around him. A wave of grief surged through his body, swift, unexpected, completely overwhelming. Images flashed through his mind. Eleanor, smiling at Amara, her voice telling him, You're a good father. Her promise to return next Saturday, a promise now forever broken. She was such a good person, Darius murmured, tears sliding freely down his cheek without shame. She didn't deserve to be so alone. Miss Thornton continued gently. Mrs. Whitmore was extraordinary in many ways. In her will, she left very specific instructions. One provision requires your immediate presence at our offices. A will? There must be some mistake. I only served her breakfast. There is no mistake, Mr. Coleman. You are specifically named as the man who cut her toast into 4 small squares every morning for 19 months. The man who treated her with dignity when most people ignored her. She noticed absolutely everything about you. At the law offices, 3 people radiated obvious displeasure. Bradley Hartley, his mother Diane, and his sister Cassandra Eleanor's family by blood, if not by bond. Bradley's contemptuous gaze slid over Darius's work clothes. This is who we've been waiting for? A busboy? Grandmother must have been completely senile. Miss Thornton proceeded with the will reading. Most provisions washed over Darius millions, distributed to museums and universities, charitable organizations, and medical research facilities. The Hartley family received modest inheritances, far less than they had clearly expected. Then Miss Thornton's gaze locked on Darius with unmistakable significance. To Mr. Darius Anthony Coleman, the young man who extended genuine kindness to an elderly woman when he had no reason to expect anything in return, who treated her with dignity when others saw only a nuisance, I leave an immediate gift of $600,000 and full ownership of the property at 847 North 4th Street, Columbus, Ohio, along with a commercial development portfolio valued at approximately $6.8 million. The room lurched around him. Bradley exploded with outrage. She left millions to a random waiter? This is insanity. We'll contest this in every court. The will is absolutely ironclad, Miss Thornton replied with cool confidence. 3 independent physicians confirmed her complete mental competency before she signed. The truth emerged in stunning clarity. Eleanor Constance Whitmore had been the founder of Whitmore Industries, a business titan worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and she had chosen Darius to inherit the heart of her legacy. I didn't know who she was, Darius whispered, still reeling. I just tried to be kind. Miss Thornton smiled faintly. That is exactly why she chose you, because you treated her like somebody when everyone else treated her like nothing. You gave her humanity when her own family couldn't be bothered to visit. Asterisk, asterisk. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in the story, and share your thoughts in the comments. Asterisk, asterisk. At Eleanor's mansion, Darius found her private study, and the truth she had carefully preserved for him to discover. A massive corkboard covered an entire wall. Photographs, newspaper clippings, legal documents, all connected by colored string in an intricate web that represented years of careful observation and planning. At the center hung a photograph. A young woman with Eleanor's eyes smiling radiantly in front of a small restaurant called Rachel's Table, where everyone belongs. Newspaper clippings told the devastating story that explained everything. Rachel Whitmore, Eleanor's beloved daughter, had been killed in a drunk driving accident alongside her 8-year-old daughter Eleanor's only granddaughter in 2003. Eleanor had lost everything that mattered to her in a single, terrible moment. Then she'd spent 2 decades searching desperately for proof that genuine goodness still existed in a world that had taken so much from her. And she had finally found that proof in a struggling waiter who had nothing to offer except simple, human kindness. A handwritten note pinned beside a photograph of Darius, taken without his knowledge, read, "He has her heart. He understands what Rachel always knew, that dignity and kindness matter more than profit, that people aren't transactions to be calculated, that the true measure of success isn't wealth accumulated, but lives touched with compassion." Rachel would have loved him. Eleanor's personal letter explained everything he needed to understand. My dear Darius, I couldn't tell you who I was while I was alive. It would have changed everything between us. And I needed to know your kindness was genuine, not motivated by expectation of reward. Every morning I tested you without you knowing. You passed every test simply by being yourself. The money is for your freedom. Freedom from the grinding poverty I watched drain the light from your eyes day after day. The diner is for your heart, a place to build the dream you mentioned once, of a restaurant where food brings people together with love. You were never just a kind waiter to me. You were the answer to a question I've been asking for 20 years, since I lost Rachel and my granddaughter. Does true goodness still exist in this world? You proved to me that it does. With deepest gratitude and love, Eleanor. Asterisk, asterisk. Think about this. Darius was just a struggling waiter trying to survive, and one simple act of kindness changed everything. How many Eleanor Whitmores are sitting in the corners of our own lives right now, waiting to be seen? Asterisk, asterisk. The following months transformed Darius Coleman in ways he never could have imagined possible. With Miss Thornton's patient guidance. He learned about managing wealth responsibly, about the legal intricacies of property ownership, about the responsibilities that came with inheriting not just money but an entire legacy of values and expectations. The first thing he did was pay off every debt that had been crushing him for years. The credit cards that had haunted his nights, the late rent payments that had threatened their home. Mrs. Patterson received a generous gift for all the mornings she'd helped with Amara, without ever asking for compensation. Harold and Rhonda both received substantial raises that reflected their years of dedication to the diner. Bradley Hartley attempted to contest the will in court, claiming undue influence and mental incompetence, but Miss Thornton had anticipated this challenge. Eleanor's meticulous documentation, the video testimony, the physician evaluations, the diary entries spanning nearly 2 years, made the case unwinnable. The judge dismissed Bradley's lawsuit within 6 weeks, noting that Eleanor Whitmore had been one of the most lucid and deliberate testators he had ever encountered in his career on the bench. Diane Hartley, Eleanor's daughter, eventually sent a letter that surprised Darius with its unexpected grace. Perhaps Mother understood something I never did, that kindness to strangers can matter as much as loyalty to family. I failed her by not visiting more often. You gave her something in her final years that we couldn't be bothered to provide. Use her gift well. Darius framed that letter and hung it in his new office at the diner, a reminder that people could grow and change, that even those who had hurt others could eventually find their way toward understanding. 9 months later, Magnolia Cafe had been transformed, but its soul remained exactly the same. New equipment, fresh paint, significantly raised wages for every employee, but still an affordable, welcoming place where working people could sit down and feel truly seen. Eleanor's corner booth remained preserved behind protective glass with a bronze plaque. Eleanor's Corner, where everyone deserves dignity, in memory of Eleanor Constance Whitmore and Rachel Whitmore, whose dream lives on. The Rachel Whitmore Legacy Initiative had funded 37 small businesses across Ohio, each one carrying forward the belief that kindness and profit could coexist, that businesses could serve communities while serving themselves. The Legacy Initiative expanded beyond anyone's wildest expectations. 87 businesses funded within the first year. Over 200 entrepreneurs trained in sustainable business practices that valued both profit and humanity. Sophia Ramirez, a young woman who had dreamed of opening a bakery featuring her grandmother's traditional recipes, became the initiative's first success story. Her shop now employed 12 people and had become a gathering place for the community, exactly the kind of business Rachel Whitmore had always believed in. One Saturday morning, Amara, now 8 years old and growing more thoughtful every day, worked on her homework in Eleanor's booth. "Daddy, do you think Mrs. Whitmore would like what you've done with everything she gave us?" Darius looked around the transformed diner. Customers from every walk of life laughing together. Harold, now earning a fair wage for the first time in his career, flipping his famous pancakes. Construction workers dining comfortably beside lawyers. Elderly regulars treated with the same respect as everyone else. "Yes, baby. I think she'd love it. I think this is exactly what she hoped for." The bell chimed. An elderly man entered, thin, weathered, hesitant, moving with the uncertainty of someone who felt he didn't belong anywhere. Darius recognized that look instantly. He'd seen it in Eleanor's eyes that very first morning. "Good morning, sir. Table for one?" Passing Amara, he heard her whisper with perfect understanding, "He looks sad, Daddy." Darius knelt beside his daughter. "That's exactly why we must be kind to him, sweetheart. Sometimes all people need is someone willing to see them. Like Mrs. Whitmore taught us." "Exactly like that, baby girl. Exactly like that." As Darius carried coffee to the new customer, sunlight streamed through the window and illuminated Eleanor's memorial plaque until the bronze seemed to glow like gold. He paused for just a moment, whispering words only he could hear. "Thank you, Eleanor. I understand now. Legacy isn't what we leave to people, it's what we leave in them. And I promise to pass it forward, one person at a time, for as long as I live." The brass bell chimed softly in the morning breeze, not tired metal anymore, but something that sounded almost like gratitude, almost like peace. and almost like the beginning of something beautiful that would ripple outward forever. Because sometimes, the smallest acts of human decency create the biggest changes in the world. Sometimes, cutting toast into 4 small squares can literally transform lives. And sometimes, the people who seem to have nothing to offer are the ones who end up giving us everything. Asterisk, asterisk. Thank you so much for staying with me through this entire story. Stories like Darius and Eleanor's remind me why I do what I do here at Real Tales, sharing true accounts of human connection, unexpected kindness, and the remarkable ways our lives intersect when we least expect it. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Real Tales if you haven't already. Your support helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. What part of Darius and Eleanor's story hit you the hardest? Was it Eleanor's secret grief over losing her daughter and granddaughter? Darius's quiet determination to be a good father despite impossible circumstances? The beautiful moment when Amara called her daddy a superhero? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I'm always deeply moved by how differently we each connect with these stories. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that kindness matters, that the smallest acts of human decency can create the biggest changes in people's lives. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Until next time, remember, you never know who's sitting in the corner booth of your own life, waiting to be seen. Be the Darius in someone's story today. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Thank you for watching Real Tales. I'll see you in the next one. Asterisk, asterisk.